Hey friends, today I want to talk about why what do you think is not a trick question. So I used to teach for a boot camp. I was teaching at UC Berkeley Extension through 2U, which is now edX, which was formerly Trilogy Education. Look, it's complicated. But as an instructor, we had a specific piece of software that we would use to gather assignments from the students. It was an LMS, a learning management system, and it was provided to us by the curriculum. So like none of this was something we had in control. I bring this up because at one point, every week during the 24-week boot camp, the beginning of the week, students are asked to fill out a form that indicates their experience, their happiness. It's a Likert scale on a scale of like 1 to 5. How do you like this? Or strongly disagree to strongly agree. Like that's the kind of scale we're talking about. And the questions were formatted in a way that I found very frustrating. Like a user researcher would not have liked these questions because they're not well phrased. I recall some of the questions asked, how did you feel about the speed, the pace of the class? Now that's different for everyone because not everyone is thinking of it from was the instructor on time? Did you have sufficient time to do activities? Well, it's a boot camp. There really is not sufficient time to do anything particularly well. Some of the instructors talk a little more, some of them read exactly what's on the screen or the slides. So the learning management system handles some of the critical interfacing between students and instructors other than the Zoom call. So it's where students submit their assignments, the TAs log in, they review the work, and then they submit the grades for the student. Then of course there's the weekly student survey. I can't remember exactly what they asked, but there's always an open forum for feedback. That's the point I'm trying to get to here. There's always open feedback, and the instructor does not get to see who left what feedback. It really is basically disembodied text on the screen, and it's alternating color backgrounds so you know how many there are and which ones are distinct messages from one student versus another. So typically there are aggregated statistics based on this like 1 to 5 scale of how well you think you did. Instructors are encouraged / maybe not necessarily penalized for not meeting a certain expectation, but it's all based on very subjective feelings for the students. So you can imagine how frustrating that might be for instructors who are like, I'm not even sure you understood the question, much less actually participated in the class. So like everyone's mileage varies on this feedback. I want to give you all of this context because it's important. So further down on that same screen where you can see your aggregated statistics about how well your students think you're doing and the actual messages, there's additional comments that they can put in about the course in general. This week was really hard, or this week was actually rather easy, something like that. So in one of the examples of weekly feedback, and I got to see this when I was substituting as an instructor for other cohorts. So I got to see feedback, and you know I'm nosy. So I was reading everyone's feedback. I saw some feedback for one of my fellow instructors, and I was really surprised and not a little frustrated. I want to read this and get it clear because I want to get it right. So the student expressed frustration that during their weekly design challenge, just homework, it included writing their response to the question, what do you think? It's a reasonable question. There's other reasonable questions that have been asked that got really interesting feedback, but we're going to hold on to that. Their anonymous feedback was, quote, asking, what do you think is not helpful for graded assignments? And that same student also asked for fewer anecdotes and rambling from the instructor and requested, quote, more examples of what the final deliverables for the design challenge should look like. That student, along with everybody probably in their cohort, graduated a long time ago, but this conversation, this feedback has stuck with me, and I wanted to bring it to you because it's actually really important. I also never had the chance to give that student any feedback because, again, I never found out who they were, but I also just didn't get to talk to the class at whole to say, oh my gosh, not only did reading that feedback suck, and that wasn't even feedback for me, it sucks for you, the person who gave it. My heart kind of sinks a little bit when someone says, I want fewer anecdotes and rambling. My immediate reaction is, oh, how unfortunate. They have completely missed the point. Storytelling is an essential part of being a designer. There's an article that I can share in the comments, which is 2 tips for better UX storytelling from Nielsen Norman Group. And it says, quote, good UX often implies skillful storytelling throughout the design process, from defining the problem to sharing stories with our stakeholders. So it is possible that this student did not appreciate how the stories were being delivered, but the telling of the story is important. Part of the value of taking a UX UI bootcamp is that interaction with your instructor. I actually wrote curriculum for the asynchronous version, which means that students got far less time with the instructor, less face time, less time of the instructor presenting and the students getting an opportunity to ask questions, and instead were directed to do the activities and the work on their own, watching videos and submitting their work without really talking to another human. And that might work well for many boot camps. I would not say it is effective for the UX bootcamp. It's something I flagged early in the process when I was hired onto the curriculum team. Part of the value of taking this UX UI bootcamp with an instructor is understanding the context of design in the real world. And the only way that you're going to get any exposure to the real world as a student or an early career designer is with those anecdotes, those stories that you get from your instructor. I did not learn UX through a boot camp. I went to a full stack development boot camp, but I learned UX on the job. I learned UX from my lead designer, my lead front-end developer also, who is now head of shopping UX at Amazon. So like, he didn't suck. I learned it through the stories he told. I got feedback on my designs, and like, I cringe sometimes thinking about like, oh, I cannot believe I used that fill from Illustrator, which is what we were designing in. And because we couldn't afford Sketch and we were at a startup, and Figma hadn't been developed yet. There's just cringe. There's a lot back there. He was very kind in the way he would give feedback, because he wouldn't just be like, that's ugly, I don't do that. He would say, that's interesting that you chose that. Let me tell you a story about someone I formerly worked with, or something that I have done that helped me make a better decision than what you're doing right now. So it is a very kind and welcoming and gentle ushering into growth and knowledge. When you don't have a job in the design world, and right now, odds aren't looking great, are they? As of recording, this is July 2nd, 2024, and the market's not awesome. So your exposure to these experiences is very limited. You're not likely to get boots on the ground experience for a little while, not with a team, and certainly not with a ton of senior designers who can give you feedback. So a lot of these anecdotes are not just like humorous but true, trials from the trenches kind of situations, but they are informative. They're helping tell a story that guides you to a solution. It's all about the designs and people that can go wrong, right? Each of these stories told as an anecdote should, in some way, adhere itself in your thought process, build into that schema of information that you are building as a human, because that's what we do. We're retaining this information and we're saving it for later so that we can cross that pattern again and go, oh, wait, I've heard about this. I know what to do here because my instructor told me about this. Maybe I haven't faced that situation before, but my instructor told me about it. I mean, at least that's what we hope for. It is, in fact, something I have done many hundreds of times in my career. In fact, the anecdotes that I've been told from people in marketing, from people in business, from people in business development, sales, the things I've been told from other designers and other developers, this all forms my schema of knowledge. That's why I have stories to tell. And it becomes my lore that I can share with others. I only usually share these stories because I want people to make fewer mistakes than I did, or make different mistakes than I did, and somehow become even more successful than I've become. So the stories aren't pointless. There's also a reason that most boot camps employ industry professionals, people who have experience in the jobs that you would like to have. It's because educators don't have that hands-on experience. They have theoretical knowledge, and there's a reason certain bootcamp curriculums do better than others, is because there's a lot of, oh, I understand how that's supposed to happen, but I've never actually done that. And it shows. It makes it difficult for students to learn. I have heard from maybe 20-something students who have told me that they have encountered a real-world situation that they were able to approach with a little bit more grace because I had told them a story about something that I had experienced. They leveraged that anecdotal knowledge to find success in a difficult situation. So I think this student did not find these anecdotes helpful because they didn't have yet any real-world context to apply them to. My advice in this situation is take what works for you and leave what doesn't. If it's not for you, it's okay to keep moving. Storytelling is, I cannot overstate this, an essential part of being a UX designer. Not to mention, it's just the job of a designer in general. And it is critical to your success in the real world. I also admit to being quite frustrated during the boot camp, and I understand it from the perspective of the student because I also appreciated seeing how things were done correctly. But again, I went to a development boot camp, and there's multiple ways to code something, and then there's a really nice way to code something, and there's only a couple of those. Design is subjective. There are many possible right answers to any design challenge. But as an instructor during the boot camp, it did frustrate me that we didn't have a lot of what does great design look like? I know because I asked many times when I was writing curriculum why we don't offer visual examples of the design challenge homework. It primarily comes down to two things. One is it's expensive to have someone do the work for a project, the same amount of hours that a student would spend on it. And most of the work that would be done is not student work. We've actually I recall when I worked there, we asked students if they'd be willing to release, sign a release saying that we could use their work in our curriculum, but none of them did. I think that was because it was very heavy-handed on the legal language, but I argued against that, but whatever. I think part of the problem also is that once students see a design, they will, and this has happened multiple times, they will design to that specific design. They don't tend to branch out because they lack confidence and they haven't tried. So there's this on one hand, you should try because it's new, it's different, even if you don't know what it's going to look like. That's the creative part. That's the part that, you're going to eventually get paid for. So we don't want you to essentially copy or try to get really, really similar to a design challenge homework, because then you're just copying. Now we just have multiple websites that look exactly the same, and nobody wants that. It's actually kind of a hoop you have to jump through in order to demonstrate that you have enough critical thinking skills to do this job effectively. So we weren't allowed to tell you that in the boot camp, but if you're I don't know what this is supposed to look like because I didn't actually get to see an example, go search, do some bench research, but come up with your own ideas. And if you cannot do that, this might actually not be the industry for you. We did also consider having those student work examples, but learning from someone who's also learning means you're learning bad habits. You're not learning from someone who's an expert, you're learning from someone who is also at your level, and that does not help you level up. If the goal was to have you create a pixel perfect example, like a recreation of a picture, a flat PNG or JPEG in Figma, that would be a different activity. And of course we would give you that visual, but that's not the job in the UX bootcamp. The design challenge work, the homework for each week required critical thought, problem solving, and coming up with a unique and well thought out result. And I gotta be honest, now that I no longer work for them and I don't have my TAs blocking what I can see, not that they blocked it, but the TAs did most of the grading. There's some not great design work out there, and there are people who are not terribly skilled at the visuals, and some of them are not going to do great as a UI designer. Some of them might do really well as a UX designer. I say all the time, I am not a visual designer. I'll get you 80% of the way there, but you're going to bring somebody in who's like really good at visual design to zhuzh it up, right? When I see a bootcamp student who has a very persistent and urgent desire to see other design work on the exact same project, my worry is that this person lacks creativity, lacks the ability to go out and look for examples, and just being simply driven by curiosity. Quite often, the folks who are looking for those examples are starting to tip into what I call people who design by checklists. They're looking to make sure that they are doing it right. They want that validation because they are so afraid to take the next step that they're just unable to move forward without an idea of what that first possible step could be. These are the people who struggle the most with a blank screen. They fiddle around with making sure they have the right frame and like which device are we going to use rather than just getting ideas out onto the screen. So that is a challenge. Something I think a lot of bootcamp students don't realize is that there is not a right solution to anything. There are many right solutions. There's many great solutions. There's a lot of terrible solutions. And there's a few really excellent and elegant solutions. It's the fear that drives them to look for some sort of standard operating procedure. And that is an inhibitor for success in UX. It's not an inhibitor for success with UI, but that's not what you signed up for. If you wanted to do only UI, you would have done a graphic design bootcamp or something along those lines. My advice in this situation for those folks who are like, but I don't know if I'm doing it right, is to just recognize that you're gonna be wrong. 70%, easily 70% of my work when I was working full-time as a designer, 70% of it went in the trash. Like it didn't go in the actual trash. Nobody prints it out and like balls it up in front of you and it's just like, it's terrible work. No, the business needs change. So we just stopped working on that feature and we worked on something else. Or the marketing team had feedback because they got user feedback, or we did user research and realized we weren't doing the right thing, or it wasn't feasible. Maybe we had 70 ideas and only worked on 2 of them, and that's okay. So here's the thing, it's okay to be wrong. You're gonna be wrong more often than you're gonna be right. Does that sound weird? Because it's true. It's totally fine, and you should be okay with being wrong. It's never going to be something that you get perfect. And that is a fear of feedback. You're afraid to put your ideas out there because you're afraid that someone is gonna say, ew, I don't like this. First, you need to know that, ew, I don't like this is a personal subjective like opinion and not a fact. And it's certainly not a statement about you and your worth. And I think we get real messed up and we forget that. It depends is always an appropriate answer. That's not the final answer. It is, well, it depends. If we're trying to accomplish X, I would probably try Y and Z. If we're trying to accomplish A, I'm probably going to test out B and C. There are so many solutions. Just try one. Do the best you can with who you are today and what you know right now. When you know better, you can do better. Students that I know are going to succeed are the ones who attempt to answer the question, what do you think? At any time, at any point in their career, at any point on their learning path. Think of that question as an opportunity to practice critical thinking and learn, nothing more. The open-ended nature of the question means you can take it in any direction. You can turn it back into a question. If somebody asks me, well, what do you think? My question is, well, about what part? The entire thing? Just this visual? Just this interaction? Give me more context. It's okay to ask for more context. It's okay to say, I'm not sure. It's okay to say, let me think about that for a minute. My favorite is, what do you think, Megan? I think we're gonna need more time. Take a sip of water. Just give yourself a brief second to think, there's a fear that comes with being put on the spot, especially with like performance anxiety and your peers around you. There's 30, 60 students on the screen and you're worried you're going to feel stupid or stumble over your tongue. First of all, y'all need to know I stumble over my tongue all the time. There's a reason we edit these videos, and like I bite my lip. Like, how dumb is that? That's weird. And it's just, I assume the braces did that. Who knows? It is never a trick question. I assume that the student thought it was a trick question. They were like somehow being put on the back floor, like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's not meant to make you feel stupid. I can't know for sure, but I really wish I could tell that student that it's okay to just have an answer. Give it a shot. There are no gotcha questions in UX, and certainly not while you're learning. It is almost scary to think that the student didn't take the opportunity to learn more. Early career designers, I need you to know that your opinion is valid. You have lived experience regardless of how new you are to this industry, and please know that there are no stupid questions. Regardless of your level of experience, you bring a unique perspective. That perspective is valuable to businesses who invest in user experience. When you are offered the opportunity to share your thoughts and you aren't sure of what to say, ask questions. What you think can simply be a hypothesis. I wonder if. Wouldn't it be nice if? How might we? It's a jumping off point to reach your next level of success. Let me recap. Stories are told for the benefit of the audience, not the storyteller. Consider what you can learn from it. Don't overthink it. Stop trying to get it right on the first try. Assume that your first draft of anything is always just that. It's a first draft. And we don't do the first draft is best draft like we did when we were just trying to get our essays done in high school and college. It's just a starting point, and I promise you your first idea for at least a few years is probably not your best idea. Get feedback. It is okay to be humble, and your opinion is valid even if you don't think you have enough experience. So, what do you think? I just need you to know that if nobody else has told you today, I love you, I'm proud of you, and I cannot wait to celebrate your success.